want to be recognized, let me know.
And if you haven't seen already, there's a Wi-Fi password, but I'm going to move the slide on, so take note of it right now. So this panel today is about building effective product teams, and I think it'll be really great no matter what level you are in product, or even if you're not in product. I'm just going to really go quickly through what Product Tank is. If you're not familiar, Product Tank is actually sort of the events portion of the group that is called Mind the Product, which you might know of because they have a big conference in San Francisco and London every year, and they also have a blog that's really popular. So these are the details on the blog, the Slack channel, and it's a global organization. It actually started in London, and so obviously we're the LA chapter. And I'm going to pass it over to Heather, who works at ChowNow and was a co-organizer of this event.
Hi, thanks everyone for joining. My name is Heather. I've been with ChowNow since February of last year. We're really happy to host this event. This is our second time doing so because we're really interested in meeting folks from the LA community and product design, engineering, all of that. Our Chief Product Officer, Emmy Yardley, was unfortunately unable to join the panel. She was planning to do so because this topic is very important to us. Scaling an organization from a small startup to, I'd say a small business at this point. And so we're happy to have our panelists join us today. They have experience from many different size organizations. So a little bit about ChowNow. Our mission is really focused on restaurants, specifically small business owners, local independent restaurants that bring flavor to your local community. So our mission is to make sure that they thrive. That means that we provide for them tech products ranging from restaurant branded, white label mobile apps, websites, as well as an online marketplace for them to reach a broader audience of consumers. And our team right now is cross-functional. So under the leadership of our Chief Product Officer, our organization includes engineering, product design, marketing design, product delivery, IT, QA, you name it. It's all under one org. And so the past year we've been going through some organizational changes, figuring out how best to scale. So this topic is really relevant to us at the moment, so I'm very excited to hear what other folks are doing. Our team right now is small and mighty. We have the Chief Product Officer, 2 product managers, a product delivery manager, and 2 product designers, but we're hiring for all of those roles listed here. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more, you can talk to anyone wearing a ChowNow label, or Gabe from our recruiting team is right there. He can help answer any questions about that. So next, I'd like to introduce you to Suzanne. She's going to be our moderator and can tell you a little bit more about our guest speakers.
Thank you. Let's give a round of applause for Heather. They fed you all. You're acting like you didn't get fed and you didn't get wine, but you got all those things. Thanks for coming. Quick show of hand, who's working in a product role right now, like currently doing the job that they love? Anyone looking to switch from that job that they love to a better job that they love at a different company like ChowNow? It's okay, your bosses aren't here, hopefully. Okay, anyone not consider themselves to be a product person, but really thinking about wanting to be a product person, or make kind of a, what I call PM adjacent pivot into that product role? Any engineers or designers? Yeah, cool, yeah, awesome, big hands, great roles. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am. I'm the co-founder of a company called The Development Factory. We're based here in Los Angeles. And what we do is we provide team as a service to startups and established businesses that have aggressive business technology goals and don't want to take a slow path to insourcing and training and learning. They want to get those goals quickly, but they do want to insource sustainable teams over time. And so we help them reach their goals quickly, and then we help them sustainably insource those teams. So I'm always looking for good product people, good designers, good engineers to join my team and join the teams of clients that we work with, that we help to build their organizations, including the roles that you heard Heather share about. So if you are looking to make a change, come find me at the break or hit me up after the fact and let's have a conversation. I also do a lot of work here in the product community in LA and abroad. That includes a free resource that I developed a number of years ago called 100productmanagers.com. So if you don't know about 100 PM, it's a free resource. We've got lots of great content and a whole bunch of new content that's going to be flowing out in 2019 from some awesome contributors, many of whom are in this room. But we have a weekly podcast as well where we talk to product leaders all around the globe about like, what is product management and is it hard and how do we actually do it and is anyone really doing a good job? And the answer to that, by the way, is no one's actually doing a good job, but we're all really trying. And I think that's a really big theme of tonight. But I believe this, right? There's a tremendous pressure when we're working inside to think that we're not doing the best job or to what are the best practices and how is everyone else doing this, and I'm embarrassed because I'm not keeping up this way or writing my user stories in such a way or doing whatever the thing. And the reality is most of us are just trying to find that right balance. So I think that's a big part of the theme tonight is just like hearing from different people about how they've done it well and maybe not so well. So I have a few questions for our awesome guests who I'm about to introduce. And then we'll open up the floor to your questions. And I really invite you to take the opportunity. You've got a tremendous amount of talent on this floor tonight and a pretty intimate group. So if you've got a question for anyone specific, like take note of it and then make sure that you bring it to the floor in a little while. Sound good? Cool. All right. So let me introduce our panel in no specific order. We've got Thad Quang, who's the CPO at the Black Tux. Thad, come on down. Logan Linzell, VP of Product Growth at Tala, and he's going to tell us all about what they're doing because it's not super active here in the US. My good friend Ashley Lewis, VP of Product at Dollar Shave Club, which is right down here in the Bay, and AJ Pondicherry, former VP of Product at Live Nation, and he'll talk a little bit about what he's got going on these days. Welcome to our panelists. Shall we sit? Yeah, cool, awesome. I don't know why I have this. I have nothing to control. So we are like sans microphones, except for that one microphone. So we're going to do our best to project our voices. But folks in the back, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so now there's a precedent that's been set. All right. And folks in the back, can you see us okay? Now that we're sitting here in these lovely chairs? Okay, cool. Let's kick off and do just like the lightning intro. We'll start with you, AJ, down at the end. So maybe tell us like, what was your first role that got you into the door of product? Where are you now? How long have you been doing it?
So the first role so I kind of came in through the back door of product, so to speak. So I was pretty much entry level in an operations team at a company called Shopzilla, or BizRate as they're also known. And the team was going through hyper growth, and I ended up, after a few years, in a lot of mentorship running that department, which contains a product management capacity. So I ended up just loving working with the product managers and building new products more than anything else I was doing. So when it came time to move on, I took a director level product role.
So you went from like off on the side to director of product level. You skipped some steps.
Yes.
We're going to come back and we're going to grill you on that a little bit. That feels a little unfair, maybe. Okay. Ashley, did you skip steps also?
No, I didn't.
Okay, thank you. Tell us about how you got into it.
Yes, I've been building digital consumer experiences for about 10 years. I actually started working at an interactive agency where we were building websites and internet applications for large companies, and I decided that I sort of wanted to be on the other side, being able to see strategies through end-to-end, etc. So found myself in product management that way. This all happened about the time that the iPhone came out and third-party apps became available in the App Store. So I spent most of my career focused entirely on mobile and mobile apps, and then just recently made the switch to overseeing cross-platform product management at Dollar Shave Club. Before Dollar Shave Club, I was at Dog Vacay here in LA, which was acquired by Rover, and eHarmony.
Sure, I was doing product before I even knew product management was a discipline. There are things that I wanted to exist in the world, and I would learn whatever I had to build them. So I started a bunch of early stage companies early in my career right out of college, not really knowing anything, but got to, went through 3 of those, learned, never made the same mistake twice, but never found one thing that had both product market fit and product channel fit in order to really grow sustainably. Along the way, started specializing in viral growth, moved to San Francisco, worked with someone, Andrew Chen, who was like a thought leader in that, Andreessen Horowitz. And then we couldn't quite virally grow that startup we were working on. We went to Uber and learned about like something that's already growing in massive scale. How do you continue to like build growth teams that have compounding growth on top of that? Spent 3 years there, built out both like teams and groups of teams, and then now joined Tala here in Santa Monica, which I'm really excited about. Where on Uber we were creating earning opportunities for millions of drivers around the world, and at Tala we're doing I think orders of magnitude more impact on the world. We're helping people change their trajectory in life by providing financial access to hundreds of millions of people around the world.
So I started off my career as an engineer, actually. Worked at Oracle in the 90s. Then joined a company called Trilogy. It's an enterprise software company in Austin, Texas. And that's really what kind of launched my product career. I found that I was not a very good developer, really. And so I knew I had kind of a ceiling there. And then they're like, hey, why don't you think about product? And I'm like, sure, I'll check it out. And so Trilogy was kind of trying to, I don't know, I felt like it was reinventing the wheel a lot. So 2005, moved to the Bay Area. I wanted to really kind of join an established tech company, so I joined eBay to really understand what like product management was like. So there, ultimately, kind of led the eBay Motors category. So that was my first kind of foray into product leadership. From there, joined a startup called Slice, where I was the second full-time hire, pre-Series A, and led product for them until their acquisition. And then after that, joined Lyft, where I led the passenger experience team, which is essentially anything to do with booking a ride in the mobile app. It was an amazing experience. And then, now relocate down here to LA to be the chief product officer at Black Duck.
So we have Lyft and we have Uber. We should have
Yeah,
sat you
we're
two
gonna-
a little further
Right.
apart if we don't. Quick show of hands if you prefer Lyft to Uber. Just let's get a quick. Logan, I'm sorry.
Raise your hand if you actually take Uber more than Lyft.
Raise your hand if you care about price and availability.
And then the whole
It
conversation
doesn't matter,
got
yeah.
derailed. Okay, so the topic of tonight's conversation is around building effective product teams. And so I think an appropriate starting place is to understand a little bit about how your respective product teams are currently structured. So that maybe you can give us a setup of kind of how big is the company overall? What is the product team scale as a subset of that? And then what is kind of the composition of your product team in terms of PMs? Do you manage designers, not manage designers, et cetera?
Yep, yeah, so in my kind of CPO role, I manage all of tech, so that's product engineering and design. We're roughly, TBT, I use TBT a lot, not Throwback Thursday, the Black Ducks, but it's roughly like 100 people. The tech team's 25. We have 2 PMs, 3 designers, like 14 engineers, and we're kind of structured into kind of 2 pods, which essentially are kind of aligned against driving some of our key goals and metrics. So that's kind of roughly how we're organized.
Logan.
Yeah, we're on an evolving product org. When I joined, they were mostly focused around individual countries that we were launching, which made a lot of sense. We're trying to like really understand the cultural differences and things like that. But what happens in those kind of like setups is like you start duplicating work, you start relearning the same things because our product isn't remarkably different, essentially country to country. So we've shifted recently where we now have basically different product teams responsible for different parts of the customer experience, and then now we're even shifting again where because it's hiring here locally enough people that we need to like fully support our business has been difficult. So we're building out regional hubs, and like once you start going global, it gets really more complicated. There's a lot of time zones we have to work in and things like that. And so we're trying to figure out the right way to make that work, and we think that the right models have specialized teams that are fully self-contained in those regional hubs, but then supporting the global mission. We'll see how that works, so we'll continue to evolve and figure it out.
When I joined Dollar Shave Club 3 years ago, we were about 120, maybe 150 people, and the product team was set up differently than any way I'd seen a product team set up before. We actually had 3 distinct groups. We had product management, design, and UX, and all 3 were sort of separate underneath a chief creative officer. So as you can imagine, a really heavily design-led type of setup. Now 3 years later, we're about 260 people, company total. My product team is made up of 10 strictly product directors of product, senior product managers down to associate PM. and we're now aligned underneath a chief digital officer. So we have product design, we're able to combine design and UX. We have product management, what we call customer strategy, which is essentially a CRM or email marketing team. And then we're also aligned really closely with our customer service group, or our club pros as we call them. So now we kind of sit underneath the chief digital structure, which makes a lot of sense. Within product specifically, we were originally split web and mobile when I joined, and we've since restructured to be more of a matrix organization as opposed to being platform specific.
I'll speak to my experience in my 4 years at Ticketmaster and Live Nation. So Live Nation Entertainment it can grow as big as 20,000 in the full swing of the summer festivals and amphitheater season. Ticketmaster is about 3,000 of those, 1,000 of which are in product and technology. And those orgs are divided into B2B and B2C. And so it's kind of like an iceberg where the majority of the product work is actually below the surface into the B2B org. I was focused on B2C, and we would have our own assigned design leads, but engineering would be a horizontal organization across both B2B and B2C. So I had it varied throughout the 4 years, but 2 product directors reporting to me and up to 5 product managers within their groups.
So I think we're talking about building teams, so let's start with kind of, the top down. And I was teasing you a little bit, AJ, before about kind of accelerating or sort of circumventing the path of getting into directorship. But I guess the question, and I'll throw it out like to the panel, and then y'all can answer and build on top of each other, is like, what was your path to becoming a product leader? And how is the role of product management fundamentally different in the capacity of leadership than it was in kind of some of those earlier positions that you might have played in your career? Whoever feels called toward it.
I'll take a shot at it.
Cool.
So I think the path that I had towards product, it was kind of stumbled upon, but what I really enjoyed about product was the problem solving aspect of it, and that there was a lot of resourcefulness involved. There wasn't a structured day-to-day, and 24/7 you're trying to figure out, how can I solve this problem better so that the market rewards me for my efforts. And so I really just enjoyed that.
Yeah, for me, when you get to start your own company, one of the advantages is that you get to be the CEO or the chief product officer. So you get the title from like day one, but it actually doesn't mean as much because the team is so small. And then when I joined Uber, it was the first really big company that I'd worked for. And the size of my initial team was bigger than any company that I worked for. And so it took a different mindset. And it really was interesting as I transitioned from an IC product manager into managing people. And the first time I did it, I was both managing a team and had one report to me. And it was really tough because as a product manager, you know that like the job fills more than you can ever give it. And so also having to like be responsible for someone and their career and making sure that they get the mentorship they need is extremely difficult. And luckily I had somebody who was really strong, and I was able to get him promoted, and then he was good. And then, but the next time I went into management, when I really became what I consider a product leader, I went all in and made sure that I created the space where I actually was had groups of teams reporting to me and not just one person. And then I was fully management, because like there's the people management side is very different than the IC level, and you really have to spend a lot of intentional time to make sure you're leveling people up. And through that, you create a lot of leverage, though, a lot more impact than you could ever have on your own by successfully mentoring other people. And that's the most inspiring part of being a product leader today.
For myself, at eBay, I joined as an IC PM, and really it was largely because of my manager, an incredible person I still look up to and still my mentor. And she really, in a lot of ways, just put herself out of job. She was the head of product for eBay Motors, and a lot of kind of what I had done in the early days, I showed the impact, but a lot of it is just, especially in a big corporation, it's just opportunity. And so she essentially was like, hey, I think you should be in line to lead product for eBay Motors. And she essentially found a transition plan, and I was able to kind of go into that role. So that was really largely because of this amazing mentor and leader that kind of vacated a role to give me the opportunity to lead product for Motors.
She knew something that you didn't. She's like, you should totally take this job. You're like, wow, that's so nice. You're just leaving. And she's like, yeah, but don't worry. It's going to be great. You're gonna love it. Ashley?
What was mentioned about kind of balancing the individual contributor and the management role resonated with me quite a bit because I spent a lot of time in that joint role. So in about the 8 years I've been doing product management exclusively, the bulk of that has been where I've simultaneously run squad teams, meaning I was writing tickets, I was managing sprints, I was actually, being an individual contributor while simultaneously managing another product manager. And being in that dual role, I think is really challenging for the reasons that you mentioned. And I did that for quite some time. I only recently became full management about a year ago, where I no longer manage teams. Much to my dismay, I try a lot of times to pick up little pet projects and I get my hands smacked away and told to stay out of it. So I guess I'm finally learning. But yeah, that's kind of the toughest part about, I think, product management and growing into those leadership roles is trying to find the time to balance how much time you're investing in someone else's career development and growth while keeping your immediate team on track, because the latter is going to be the one that has the most need and is going to be asking and demanding the most of you, whereas the management piece, you have to be really proactive and create time for it. It was a great learning opportunity, but I think everyone kind of goes through that in product.
It was a long time to go through that.
It was a long time, yeah, it sure was.
I've asked this question on the show a lot of product leaders, and one of the things that's come up is this, that as you move into leadership in product, the product becomes the team and the processes more than the features themselves. So I'm curious to hear from the panel, what are those processes that become really challenging, that you have to think and rethink? And this is just like getting into the reality of, how do we organize our software delivery schedule? What is going to be our protocol for documentation? Are we doing documentation, and who's looking after that? And anybody want to share war stories, or just how you've encountered and handled that as leaders now that you're not allowed to wireframe and work on cool stuff anymore? Let's be honest.
I'll start. I would consider my main product these days actually figuring out the road mapping and what it is that we're going to work on. So we actually spend more time thinking about it and refining it and investing in making it better. So we divide our roadmap into 4 categories. We have what's called strategic initiatives. Those are the really big, boulder type items in your roadmap. We have things we call customer requests, which are things like updating a module on the homepage for marketing or doing a pixel for the acquisition team. And then we have, of course, what I call squad optimizations, or things like I want to test this CTA versus that CTA, things the PM actually wants to do. And then of course bugs and tech debt falls into a 4th bucket, and just figuring out literally the process for how you prioritize each of those buckets, keep track of, and then communicate back out the progress against it is sort of the main product I work on. And it follows the same process that any other product does, from interviewing stakeholders and pulling data and doing retrospectives, but that's sort of where I find myself spending the most time.
Let me just insert a quick follow-on to that question, because I think road mapping is probably a hot topic for a lot of us. So the question would be, what is kind of the current plan trajectory of your roadmap at Dollar Shave Club? How far into the future are you known? And then how often are you actually tweaking and changing that versus just watching it potentially be on track or not?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would definitely say we haven't perfected it, though I feel like going into 2019 we have a much better crack at it. So at the moment we have our 2019, that strategic initiatives bucket I mentioned, we have 2019 scheduled out for Q1, Q2, and Q3. And we know with a very high degree of confidence Q1 is locked, and then as you progress to each other quarter, it gets progressively less locked. So we review that on a quarter by quarter basis. So we operate sort of in a 30, 60, 90 prioritization cycle, where we're always looking at, okay, the next 30 days is for sure locked, 60 is most of the way there because it should be in design already, and then 90 we're starting to talk about what's going to happen there. So it's sort of like we lay out the strategic initiatives at the quarter level a year in advance, and then everything else sort of flows through a 30, 60, 90 prioritization process. But the point of the buckets is to allow space for things that do need to be more real time to be inserted without disrupting the rest of the work that we've already committed to.
AJ, like 1,000 people you spoke about on the tech team, like that's a pretty huge scale. Can you tell us a little bit about how things like process management show up in your capacity in that role?
It's tough. You definitely have to invest a little bit more in what may be called overhead, and you need to be a little more thoughtful in the tools you may use for communication, project management software, and things like that. In a small company, it's almost impossible for information not to get around. In a big company, you really need to make an effort, and it's like turning a supertanker around versus a sailboat. One of the solutions that we've found that helps enforce that clarity is making sure that everyone knows how their success metrics translate into the overall company's success metrics. And if you can't figure it out, then that's probably a good call to action to take a look at what you're working on. And making sure that you're clearly measuring everything. So analytics was a centralized group within the company, and those best practices were established there. And just like OKRs, you kind of make sure that everything levels up all the way through. But I think that more time does get lost as you try and turn the ship as the market changes and you decide, hey, this investment's probably not panning out, let's shift resources to this one. That's where there tends to be a little bit more waste in a bigger company.
Anyone in this room using OKRs at your current organization? Just show of hands. Yeah, anyone, like, what are we talking about when we say OKR? Product management loves acronyms. There's like objectives and key results. So this is, this is a goal setting framework. It links broad, ambitious goals to like the finish line that lets us all know how we got there. And then in a perfectly executed way, if you follow it, it's like at the very top, there's an OKR for the company, and the key results create dimensionality, and then every department grabs a key result and makes that their objective, and then they put 3 key results under, and it goes like that. Has anybody ever seen OKRs be successfully implemented in the way that I've just described? I'm looking at the panel here. Have you seen that happen?
What's your definition of success?
Success looks like, the way I described it is exactly how it's playing out, no questions asked.
Yeah, I mean, at Lyft was a heavy OKR culture. I think there's obviously pros and cons to OKRs. I mean, I actually loved them. It drives alignment, and ultimately it drives a lot of purpose into laddering up a lot of the bottoms up planning towards, especially the finance models we're trying to. I mean, so like rides was the big thing at Lyft. So trying to have teams try to understand and back of the envelope model out like how they're going to drive that. Like, all good stuff in terms of alignment. Now, the cons are sometimes you get into the weeds and you're like, hey, this care and this. And so like there's a lot of like details and tactics that I think teams can get lost into, but the overall theme of trying to align teams around goals, for sure, like I thought that's a great thing and something that I hope to bring to the Black Tux. We're just not quite there yet, but yeah, I certainly saw that with my teams at Lyft.
So because we are talking about processes, I mean, this is an interesting insight. So at the outset, I spoke to the room about there's this idea of how we want to do it, or we read things, or we listen to 100 PM podcasts, and we're like, oh, that sounds amazing, I want to do that, and then it's harder in practice. So talk about your experience going from an organization that's doing something really well, and you were part of that, or maybe you even led that, and now you're in a different organization that's not quite there, and you're like, I know how to do this, but I also know that I can't implement it. Like, how does that friction show up for you as a leader?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that Lyft is up to a totally different scale than obviously at the Black Tux. So you need the personnel and the scale of people, personnel in place, and as well as the buy-in from leadership to like be aligned with like, yeah, I believe in OKRs and I believe in being able to have teams do bottoms-up planning. Because at Lyft, they did a good job of like quarterly, like leadership would kick things off, tops down, here are our goals, here are the things we want to go do, and then let the teams go off, and then do bottoms-up planning. It was a great kind of like exercise there, and I think philosophically at the Black Tux, for sure, they agree with that, but it's just a matter of operationalizing that, getting that going, and get the people in place who also know how to kind of get that. So I think we'll get there. It's just going to take time in order to like get that operationalized too. So that's the challenge I face.
I call that meet in the middle planning.
Yeah.
So it's like when both sides feel like they had a say into it, and then you both agree on everything, and you avoid either the tops down problems or the bottoms up problems.
Yeah.
What about for you, Logan? What have been some of the key challenges of process or people management as you kind of moved into more leadership type roles?
Yeah, so one of the interesting things too that I'm always like honing on is, and what my team loves me for, is like running effective meetings and actually just challenging meetings that you're having. Because like, I mean, we're like around a little over 100 people in Santa Monica, and I look at the schedules of some of the folks on my team, and I'm like, you're in way too many meetings. And so both helping them unpack their schedules about the places they actually need to spend time, and then, you know, and on teams directly, like, are they having the right meetings? And I'm definitely a big proponent of the philosophy of just enough process to make you effective and not enough to get in your way. Because, as a product manager, I'm used to like being in all those kind of meetings, but it's kind of a lazy answer to always like, oh, let's schedule a meeting to solve this problem. And so you want to make sure the right people are there, you can make the effective decisions, and, you know, enough prep work has gone into it. Because it can, working at a big company, once you get to the scale of like Lyft or Uber, like you start to see these like, these, I forget what they call it, but like there's like a bunch of like, meetings that ruin your IC's like workday, and then the things don't get done. So keeping teams running efficiently that way and really being diligent about meetings is an important thing that I really bring to every company I work with.
Yeah, in a few minutes, I'm going to open up the floor to questions. So if you've been thinking about a question for the panelists, then get that up in your mind. And of course, I can talk all night if I need to, so that's also fine. But I want to maybe ask as a potential segue into questions from our audience, is there, in your experience or in your opinion, a right way to structure a product organization? Meaning, we talk about pods, we talk about squads, we talk about designers should be in, designers should report to CPO, designers shouldn't report to CPO, designers should be shared, they should never be shared, we should have separate platforms, we shouldn't. Just a little bit about how you would step into an organization and kind of architect an ideal product, a scalable product team, based on kind of what you think is right, which of course is just opinions. AJ?
I'm really resisting the "it depends" answer.
That's the official product management answer for everyone.
But I would probably take a step back and ask the questions of what is the organization trying to do? What's their purpose? Where are they invested? What's the type of market? And then look at what are the resources needed to solve the problems that market faces and maximize the reward from those. And strive to be self-sufficient with your product teams, but know that, with Ticketmaster, you're coming into a 40-year-old company. Some of the technology is close to that old. You're gonna, there's a hairball underneath there, so you're never going to be able to be completely self-sufficient, and you just need to prepare. Well, in order to be dependent on other teams, unfortunately, you need to implement some constructs so that you know how their roadmap's doing, they know how your roadmap is doing, and it's not the fun stuff, but that's the stuff that's sometimes needed. So you might need project management resources, you might need a program manager, looking at how, we're in a pretty software-heavy world, but it's not always just about software. There's hardware, there's people resources to manage too, and so being thoughtful about where those play into the mix. Do you need a product marketing function from day one, or is your product manager going to play the product marketing role? I would ask all those questions around the problem solving and construct the team.
Just as a quick add-on to that, is there, in your mind, a ratio around product manager to additional cross-functional resources? Meaning, how many other team members, whether that's engineers, QA, project management, can one product manager or product owner sort of reasonably handle before you start to need to look to splitting that off into a secondary team?
Well, I think there's ways for a product manager to spread their influence or their vision across more engineers or designers or people on the data science side. I think the way that I would kind of scope the role of product manager is, if the company has decided to invest in solving the problem that the product manager is trying to solve, that product manager should strive to be the best in the world at understanding and solving that problem. Once the scope of that problem exceeds what one person can do, that's the time when you want to grow your product team. If you find that there's just more engineers than a product manager has time to work with, there might be some help in a project manager or Scrum Master that could be added to help with some of that.
Great, super helpful. Ashley?
Yeah, so when it comes to setting up the team, I mean, what you kind of alluded to this with the people resources, especially with my team the size of 10, even if I could set it up in such a way that I felt was perfect for Dollar Shave Club and our goals, there's no way that what I think is perfect would also align with 10 people who I want to be happy and their career path and their career goals and their desires and what interests them as well. So it's oftentimes just figuring out what fits for your team members and for the business, which is a very tricky puzzle. But the one thing that I always go back to no matter what when building my teams is finding something for each PM to own. And it may not be the biggest business problem we're trying to solve. It may just be, I have an associate PM and she owns our physical product launch process, but she owns it end to end and she's responsible for it. So when we launch a new physical product, she can be really proud of it. So no matter how I structure us from a title or a grouping or a squad or a pod perspective, I just make sure that everyone owns something and that something is sized to align with their skill set or the level that they're at. We stick from a squad management perspective, we stick to about 7 or 8 max per PM. I totally agree that one PM could oversee the vision that gets taken up by a set of squads. There's no doubt about that. But from a day-to-day management perspective, that's the size we try to keep our squads. And if we need to scale up to accommodate additional engineers, then I always ask we scale up on product as well.
Yeah, for me, I know what unsustainable feels like. When I first joined Uber, I joined a team of 20 engineers, 4 designers, 3 data scientists, and I had to build out a product team under me. In the meantime, make all of these people with no backlog, successful and be excited about their work. And I wasn't successful across all of those metrics. Eventually, I was able to hire the right product managers, and we restored some balance to the team. And from that, not to be too prescriptive, but something around the 10-person mark is actually really effective. And especially when you're dealing with mobile products, you want to make sure you have the right balance between front-end engineers and mobile engineers, front-end and back-end engineers, or mobile and back-end is what I mean. And of course the right design and data science. And what I find is really, and now right now because of our hiring constraints, we have a few teams that are very cross time zone, and working through those challenges is always fun to keep everyone on the same page. But there's something really magical when you have both product, mobile, and designers with basically sitting right next to each other, and they can show each other what they're working, that they can be the most effective. And so the more you can create those kind of teams where the speed of communication can happen, it'll be more effective. But at the same time, as a product manager, your job is just to deliver results, no matter what you're given to work with. Your ideal team state is rarely going to match what you can hire for at that exact time, and so you just have to do the best with what you have.
So for myself, I don't know if this is the right answer, this is my personal experience, but I very much believe in kind of the pod or squad models and aligning teams around goals, particularly the product design and engineering. I have seen it fall apart in my past experience. For example, I won't name the company, but the company had a centralized design team where it was almost like an agency within the larger company where you would ask a designer hey, what's your goals? And they just kind of shrug like this, and so their work wasn't aligned with how they would be aligned to the various pods. And so I very much believe in getting all the cross-functional team members together and building goal-driven organizations and pods that really are in lockstep to drive impact that way. And that's really why I kind of took the opportunity of the Black Tux, because having all 3 functions of product design and engineering and making sure that every team's aligned on the same goals, ultimately, and the goal being drive impact for the business. That's ultimately what we're kind of in this for, is to drive business impact. And so that's kind of structurally what I believe in. You hire smart people, give them the right goals, and then let it go. So
We're going to create a bunch of value for everyone in the audience by letting you ask some really specific burning questions. So before we do that, we're going to create a bunch of value for these kind folks up at the front. So what I want to invite each of you to share is there an ask that you have right now, whether that's, you're looking to hire specific talent, or you're looking for insight or input or friendly resources, just anything that the folks in this room might be able to provide to you, or they might be able to go home tonight and say, I know someone and I'm going to make sure to connect AJ on that particular matter, just real fast. How can we help you?
And also, can you project, because we didn't know you'd be competing with the fridge.
Oh.
So they can hear about that.
Oh.
Thank you.
We love competing, if we had known. Okay, so how can we make your life better or more interesting?
Hiring. I'm looking to hire a senior product manager to kind of lead the core product part of the Black Tux actually. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
Right, senior product manager hire.
Yeah, if you could tell the tallest story around LA, I think we're still trying to like build that brand here because a lot of folks want to work on a product that they know and can use, and it's more associated with them. And so sometimes like our story doesn't get told, but we're actually having an amazing impact. Tala.co, check out the website. We are hiring for a lot of positions on product, specifically people with credit and technical backgrounds are kind of our biggest needs. And then Android engineers, like, and please send anybody that's ever been Android or wants to learn Android, we'll even train. It's a hard position to hire for here in Santa Monica.
Yeah, our Android engineers have always been in the Ukraine. I cannot find any Android engineers here in Los Angeles. We're also hiring engineers. I've given up on Android, but you can send them his way. I'll take it. And specifically QA. We have a lot of QA folks spots we need to fill. And interestingly, from my opinion, QA is a great role if you know anyone looking to get into product, but they just can't find their way into a product role because everything requires a couple years of experience. I've personally hired quite a few PMs into their first product roles out of QA roles. So we're hiring QA and then a little bit on product as well.
Awesome.
I'm not going to compete with the hiring frenzy there, but Jovin, who's in the audience, co-founded a company called STEM, and I co-wrote a piece around the music industry and where it's headed and where we think technology is influencing it. We just published it on Medium a couple days ago, and so if you take a read and comment, even if it's not in line with our views, we'd love to have a discussion online or off.
Yeah, the key metric there is claps. Claps on Medium for the guys here. Awesome. So who here has a question for our panel? Awesome. Mio,
Yeah. Do I need to stand up or?
what do you feel called to do?
I think I can project.
Okay, project, but remember that most of the room is behind you.
Okay.
Okay.
So my question is basically, what's the key factor or key factors that you look for when trying to hire a product leader? And whatever the product leader means for you, maybe it's a lead or beyond, or maybe just director, or maybe even senior product managers. You consider them to be product leaders as well. But what are the key factors that you're looking for?
Cool, let's hear from one or two of our panelists on this.
Sure. So there's actually I draw a very big distinction between product leaders who are managing other product people and then also like a senior product manager. And so in my senior like IC product like type roles, I'm looking for grit, someone who I have full confidence that I can give them a problem and they will attack it and they will overcome any obstacle in their way to do that. And you can look for different, when you interview, you look for different examples in their past of like when they've done that. For product leaders, the interview that I hold on like on that interview panel is like their people management skills, and it's something that you have to actually really invest in to get good at because it's a completely different skill set than a lot of the other product parts that you've done. You make it relevant because you have done the job yourself. But making people excited and developing them as people and for their careers and holistically serving that need requires a lot of intentionality that a lot of folks just don't get the opportunity or don't think that they actually need to learn it. And they just feel like, oh well, I know how to be a boss. I've had a boss, and it takes a lot more than that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to add? Other questions?
Yeah, thank you guys. So you've all worked for different companies.
So just because the rest of the room won't be able to hear
Yeah,
you.
I know.
Sorry
Okay.
about that. So you've all worked for different companies, and I'm sure you're getting hit up on LinkedIn all the time. So before you jump ship, what do you look for in a company? Like top 2 or 3 things before actually making that move?
This now. I'm accepting all offers.
I can go for it. Or you go.
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting. The last 2 opportunities, I actually left the companies first before accepting offers. And it's interesting, I got this, it was Michael Deering, he's like a managing partner over at Paris Metal. He once gave this advice, which is, if you're looking for your next opportunity, how are you going to do that if you already have a full-time job, right? Like, this is a meaningful thing to go pursue. You need to network, you need to have coffees, you need to really like lean into like looking for this next opportunity and really have time to reflect about what you want to go pursue. So with both eBay and Lyft, I actually left both companies to do that. I actually went to, and it was a little bit of like reflection of like what was I seeking, but also just like in these conversations, they organically, like sometimes you won't realize what you're looking for until you're like, oh, this sounds amazing, it's the opportunity, whatever it may be. But a lot of times, very frequently for me, was especially for the jump from Lyft to TBT, a lot of what I found in my self-reflection was just autonomy. I was looking for that autonomy. I felt like in so many of my past experiences, it was like I felt like I was a mercenary, not missionary. So I really wanted the opportunity to come in and build an organization that I felt like I could really drive down that autonomy and ask for accountability back. So that a lot of these things were like I found in my own time of self-reflection that I cared about, but also just the time to network and meet people, and you'll uncover things during that kind of journey that'll be that you won't even think of really. So
Yeah, and you moved to LA for it, so it must have
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The last two job changes I've made, in both cases I followed someone to that company, so a small LA tech scene. So when I left eHarmony to join Dog Vacay, I followed the VP of engineering over there because I just valued working with him so much and knew that he was going to do great things and I wanted to be a part of that. And then similarly, when I left Dog Vacay to join Dollar Shave Club, I went because someone who had previously worked with me at eHarmony was there and asked me to join. So just like close networking, and it was all about wanting to join something that person had chosen to be a part of. I think for my next move, I would probably do something, where I would take the time to reflect. I think when you love product management as much as so many of us do, when you get that LinkedIn email or you take a phone call, it's really hard not to get excited because you hear about other people's product problems that you're having. And I have this tendency to be like, oh, I want to do that and I want to do that. I get like overly eager on making these job shifts, but there's just so many cool things out there happening. But yeah, I think taking the time to like reflect and figure out what you're looking for, but the autonomy, opportunity to build, having trust that the founder or whoever the leadership you'd be reporting to is going to trust your vision is really important.
So many questions. I don't know if that's a sign of a good panel or a bad moderator. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Ege. I'm actually a current student at UCLI, and I've been trying to get PM internships, and I got to talk to a lot of people in terms of what your role was like. And my question is, it seems to me that PM is a role where if you want to do work, you can work here all day. And honestly, you're the person responsible for the delivery of a product. And I was wondering how you guys found the balance between like your life and then your work. And I think that's like a really interesting question to tackle considering how many aspects like product management covers.
Considering you're all here at 8 p.m. on Wednesday nights at home with your friends and family.
Yeah, it's a good question. I can jump in. So as you know, like the stages of a product life cycle, we're not constantly working on every part of a product all the time. There's parts that require more attention and then parts that require less. But I think when I'm super invested in something I'm working on, yeah, I'm going to work on it like all night, all weekend, because I'm just so excited about it. It's not like I even have to. It's just like you're in this and you want to solve it. But I don't think that's sustainable. But it also isn't what the business asks for, because usually you get something to a stable state and you hand it off. So I always say to my team, like, product goes in waves. And at any given time, I know who of the 10 PMs on my team are like in the trenches and who are sort of like waiting, if you know what I mean. So it is intense, and you get really invested in what you're working on, but that's not necessarily like the stable state at all times.
Yeah, it's an all-consuming job. I mean, that's just the nature of it. And so what you have to get really good at is ruthless prioritization. If you know, you'll never be able to do everything, so if you know the most important things that you need to do to keep the team moving forward and being effective, you prioritize those and then just kind of set a stop limit on time. There'll be times that you'll require extra effort beyond that, but there'll always be plates spinning, and you try to keep as many of them in the air as long as you can. And then when actually it's a good sign, like when a lot of those plates are falling, that like something's broken and that you either need to split the team and bring on other folks, another product manager, or reprioritize some parts of the project.
Let's hear two more from the room, and then Look at the mind, it's lighting up, it's amazing. We'll take 2 more questions, and then we do actually have a little bit more time for sort of post-panel networking, so, our guests will hang around for a few minutes and you can chat. Otherwise, we'll do the find me on LinkedIn, and you can ask questions as well. So let's hear from someone at the back. You, sir, in that lovely burgundy shirt that you have.
My name's Chris. Trying to internalize everything and kind of find the best practices for managing a remote team. So I wonder if you guys have any ideas or things that can help me. I have a couple developers. A couple of them are in school still, so I'm trying to manage them. I have a designer in Wisconsin who I've worked with for over 10 years. I'm just trying to find the best ways in which to manage the team that I have to build a product that we're trying to build. I don't know if you have any insight on working with remote teams that can help me.
Yeah, I could start it off. When I was at Shopzilla, we shifted a lot of our operations to India and then China, and then a lot of our development from on-site to the Ukraine. Eventually, we shifted a lot of the operations to the Mechanical Turk, which is a whole separate story. But I think it perhaps goes without saying, but communication, setting up, especially if there's different time zones, maybe for the Wisconsin person, this isn't as much the case, but depending on where they are, making sure that there's a regular time you can depend on to meet with these people, that you're using communication methods that are comfortable for everyone, whether it's video conference or Slack. And I found that oftentimes when you shift roles overseas, it's with the intention of saving or cost cutting. But what you oftentimes need to recognize is there needs to be a little bit more overhead. So for engineering teams, for example, you'll oftentimes have a project manager sitting with the overseas team and a project manager that's sitting with your team. So sometimes you do need to invest a little bit more in that kind of communication overhead to bridge the gap.
We're a very remote team currently, and the time zones are difficult, especially like two of our countries are Philippines and India, where it doesn't matter, like it never lines up work days, and so that can be frustrating. But I think the big thing is not everything can be, this is times we need to have those effective meetings where there needs to be some face-to-face time as much as you can, using the video conferencing, tools. Everything can't be over Slack. A lot of context gets lost in that, and the reason it can work in when you're located in the same office is because you also have that other FaceTime, so you know who that person is, and you know when they say they type the word this way, they mean it this way. And so much of that you can build. If you try to get the teams together at least once a year, if not more, that can be really effective, and and even in a relaxed environment, because building those relationships will make you effective teammates.
Yeah, definitely. I even bring my Ukrainian engineers over at least once a year.
Awesome. I'm planning on renting out an Airbnb and bringing. His name's Ray, though, so I'm bringing him out here. My other development team is here. They're at UCLA or USC and Fresno State, so I'm going to bring them all down.
Pays huge dividends. It's always worth the cost.
Totally.
For sure.
Last question, Son.
I think we touched a little bit on making ICs feel that their work is being valued. So as product leaders, how do you create that downstream impact? What approaches have been successful to create that?
Do you mean for individual product managers or for the people on the team?
A little bit of both, I guess, for individual product managers, but also maybe engineers within the product team as well.
I think it starts with setting a strong vision where everybody has to be bought into where they're going and knowing how their work ladders up into making that happen. This is where the OKRs can be, the OKRs paired with the vision is when they're most successful, where you know where you're going and this is how we're measuring our progress towards it. And the other just really celebrating wins and making sure you take the time out to do that. Both shipping products, experiments that are successful, taking that moment to recognize the work that went into it and that it was, but also at the same time, not harping on failures because they're actually all learning opportunities. In fact, if you're not failing at those kind of things, you're sort of pushing the limits and you're not experimenting quick enough.
On the celebration front, it sounds corny. There's a book by Seth Godin called The Purple Cow. You should read it. It's great. It's something I've carried through my career. But what I do is like for the team that kind of drives the most impact, I give like this giant stuffed purple cow for them to like. But it sounds corny, but it's like it's over the top, but it really celebrates the win there. And I also like to give out individual kind of recognition as well to the there's smaller things that happen during quarters and halves, but those little things actually go a long ways in terms of recognizing the folks in your team. And I think it's it's just little over the top things that I found that's been successful in my career.
Don't be afraid to get cheesy. Trust
Yeah,
me.
for
It
sure.
works.
Yeah,
It's
it's
effective.
a sign of vulnerability as a product leader, but it's the team appreciates it for sure.
Let's have a round of applause for these amazing panelists. We've got a little time left. The good folks at Chow Now here who have made this amazing space possible, and I think there might even still be some beer and some food left. So go mingle, come find the guests, connect with us on LinkedIn, and stay connected through the Product Tank Slack channel. What's that plug there again, Pam?
Actually, the plug is that we might have a recorded, a link for this later that we can review. Hopefully you can hear everything, but I'll send it out. But yes, if you're not signed up on the meetup, please do that because you'll find out about our next event too. And a round of applause for Suzanne, actually.